Hello, and welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Schmidt List. On this episode, I've got Ned Johnson, the Senior Vice President and Director of Project Management at GTB. He joins me to talk about how the future of project management needs to be more strategic within an organization. Also, I'm doing a speaking event on April 18th about how to lead product teams. You can go to schmidt-list.com
All right. Well,
and
Ned, welcome
check
to the
that
show.
out there.
Thanks for taking
or
the time
you can
to
go
join me
to
today.
Facebook/Schmidt-list and check out the event
Ned,
there as well. Hope
you
to
and
see you
I
out
met
there.
quite a
It's going
while
to be
ago,
a super fun
but I know
time.
things
All that
have-
being
you've
said,
been-
here's my
you're
talk
a
with
mover and
Ned.
shaker in your own right. So tell me a little bit about your background, how you got involved in project management, and then currently what you're doing today.
Absolutely. It's, well, I think it's sort of an interesting trajectory. At least I'm looking back and I'm happy with it. So it was sort of funny, I don't know, early 90s or something like that, around that time frame. I was in PR and communications for a big automotive supplier. I'm in the Detroit area, so pretty much always been automotive type work. And a company with an auto supplier with employees in 18 countries around the world. And I went in there, and I realized that they were still trying to bring their sort of executives and leadership around the world up to speed on industry news and information through like old-fashioned clip sheets and things like that. And I said, "Hey guys, have you ever thought of maybe putting this information in email?" And they said, "Well, that's a great idea." And then so that took off. And then the next thing I said, "Hey, there's this stuff. It's called an intranet." And people really didn't know what the heck that was back then.
Right.
So I somehow, managed to find myself building this particular company's first intranet, which really opened the lines of communication between, all of the different, global entities within this company. And it just did incredible things for the communications. It really helped them become, more efficient, not only with their operations in the company, but their general communications, et cetera, et cetera. But, what's interesting with that, because I had no project management experience then. Mm-hmm. And what I was doing is I was, wandering the halls of the IT group, looking for, people to help me. I was, talking to, designers who were, automotive designers. Hey, help me come up with some, images and some, logos and things like that. But what I realized in that is I loved the technology and I loved the communication. But what I loved even more was being that person whose job it was to bring all those sort of, disparate personalities and skill sets together, and get them aligned on a, sort of a common mission. So I didn't even know what I was doing at the time, but it was project management. And then once I figured that out, I said, wow, I've got to, I love this technology stuff. I love this project management stuff. I got to figure out how to make a career out of that. So I, jumped ship to, somewhere, mid 90s, to a small internet company, and we were doing, all sorts of, early web development stuff for, anything you can imagine, from, publications to jewelry wholesalers to you name it. The list of different customer types that we worked with just gave me, a vast array of experience. And then, also learned a lot about, team building again among, people with disparate backgrounds, because a lot of our development started to shift to, offshore resources, at the time. So, what that's like. And then I made another quick pivot, and this was, maybe in the early, app development days when, BlackBerries were, really something that people loved. I worked with a small company where we developed BlackBerry apps, which I did that for a few years. And I was, so really, a project/product manager, I would say, and that's for those particular apps. I mean, we are a little before our time in terms of the Word app, the small company where we were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I decided to make another jump, which was an opportunity to get into the advertising space within the Detroit community, which is a pretty massive advertising industry here with all the automotives, obviously. And started working for an agency who said, "Hey, we need to start building out our project management discipline because," and this is another really interesting point, that continues to be interesting today throughout my career, is bringing the discipline. I had an opportunity to bring the discipline of project management to advertising agencies that had always, traditionally relied on the roles of, account managers to essentially do project management work, but without necessarily the skill sets or the training to do project management work. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, advertising campaigns were becoming so much more complicated with the advent of digital, et cetera, and the rest is sort of history.
So did you find during that time that starting to install processes and gates were well received, or was there a lot of pushback initially, either from internally or from the client side?
Yeah, there was undoubtedly a lot of pushback. And I mean, first to your point, it's that agencies really before the advent of digital, I don't want to say the projects weren't complicated, but they definitely were not as complicated as building interactive websites with massive databases behind them. Mm-hmm. There's it's a little I don't want to say it's easy, but the steps are more clearly laid out for developing a print ad or a TV spot, then building some type of immersive online experience, which is what all the brands wanted to figure out how to do.
Right.
And then the other thing that you got to realize with working in advertising, supporting big brands, is they have significant media dollars tied into specific dates. Whether it's it's the launch of a new vehicle is happening on X date, and that's when it's happening, and you're going to hit that. Right. So you have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that there's absolute constraints that you're not going to shift. Yep. So I think the way, and I think this is happening throughout the industry, it's still happening today, is that it's continuing to be a long education process for to do our best work on behalf of whatever brand you're working for. Here's the way you need to work. Here's the steps you need to take. And it's a long, hard battle, but there's a lot more people listening today than there were people 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah. Do you feel that, and sometimes I feel like the reason for that is because there was this time over the last 5 years where people got burnt a lot over bad expectations and have learned from those things and have matured in a way now, especially in the leadership positions within a lot of these organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great point. Not only within the leadership of, advertising and marketing agencies, but also, the leadership in, sales and marketing, divisions of big brands. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're now starting to see, people in those, definite positions of authority, not only at agencies, but at brands and marketers that now have, a couple decades of, digital experience under their belt, and they're the ones that are, pushing their brands forward using digital experience, but they understand what it takes to do that. Mm-hmm. Whereas, 5-10 years ago, not everyone really understood what it took to do that and how complicated doing that is.
Right. And in an article you recently wrote for CIO Magazine, you talk about kind of how to make that process work for the rest of the team. And what I really like, the overall feeling I get from it is about how much more strategic project managers need to be today than they needed to be a few years ago. A few years ago, they really needed to be the masters of budgets and timelines and those sorts of things. But today, they need to be crossing over a bit into that product role, into that account role too. They're really those great connectors between clients, between sales, between the development and design teams, or wherever you're working. You need to be that great connector. And one of the quotes that I love that you wrote in here is talking about how you need to be taking the lead, but not necessarily the lead actor, not having the spotlight on yourself. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, that's a topic I try and teach and mentor people on whenever I get a chance, and there is this, and that's sort of where looking back at the history of project management, what that position was all about is almost sort of like a dictatorial, if that's the right word, position of authority, mm-hmm. who has helped map out the tasks that need to be accomplished to deliver the project or the product, and then really sort of being that authoritarian leader who demands that those tasks are completed by all the team members. But that approach to me is inherently flawed, and I'll tell you sort of when I'm sort of ashamed to tell you that that realization didn't happen for me not 10 years ago, unfortunately, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where when I started to take agile methodologies, seriously, mm-hmm. and look at some of the great techniques that are used in various, agile methods, to whether it be, running, discovery workshops, developing roadmaps, with clients, participating in the conversation, sort of in that discovery phase of the process. What used to happen, and I was guilty of this, is that I would be, paired up with, an account person, or maybe a business development person based on, wherever I was working. And, the two of us would be the ones, working with the client, the direct interface to the client. And then, through sort of, you can almost look at it like the phone game, going back to your teams who are the experts, who are actually the people who are going to be doing the work, asking them, well, how long do you think this is going to take? Instead of positioning your project team members to have, a strong voice along with the client to, help truly understand what the work is, and then therefore, really help, define what the scope is. So just let me tell you, a quick story that, really happened to me, and I referenced in that one article that you were talking about. I talk about a scenario where maybe there's a project manager and an account person or a business development person talking with a client who's got a great idea about the next piece of functionality on their app or the website, and the project manager's with the client, and they're saying, yeah, that I think that's a great idea, let's figure out how to get that done. Okay, then you take that back to the team, and they niff and gnaw on it for a while, and give you an estimate. What's the quality of that estimate going to be? Right. You've sort of you've played that telephone game already. But what I saw happen in a workshop that I was running, a discovery workshop, is that the team and I had really worked on what we thought, the business objectives were, the success metrics, et cetera, et cetera. The team really understood what the client was looking for. Then, what happened is that we shared, with the team in the room, the team's understanding